So I got a new watch. Well, I was sent it. And it's not something you'd expect. It's a bit of a wild card. Hang on, let me get it. Oh, this is nice. Smell is nice. So what on earth is this thing? Well, it's a skeletonized, manual wind, central axis offset tourbillon. And it's finished reasonably well. There's multiple high-end finishing techniques used. Not yet up to the Swiss level, but those watches cost 20 of these. So how did this come about? Well, Peacock wanted me to make a video on one of their watches. I'll go over the company and their offerings later in the video. I chose this particular one because it's realistic in terms of its dimensions. 41mm case diameter. So most of these sort of watches, these Chinese highly complicated watches, they've got really unrealistic dimensions. Most of those watches use a dinner plate as a benchmark for watch size. But this one nails size with its 41mm case, 11mm of thickness, and a decent lug to lug, which I have not yet measured, but I think it's under 50mm. So it wears reasonably well. The other key aspect is the thickness of the watch, which is something that most companies get wrong as well when they go highly complicated. It becomes really thick. The dial architecture on this watch, as decided by Peacock, is supposedly inspired by one Scottish bridge. This one. I'm going to move on because I like the rest of this watch. I find the overall design to have its sort of own identity. It's quite industrial. It has a lot going on and it's not badly done. It's quite decent. In terms of dial elements, the first thing you notice when you look at this watch are the hands. No, I'm kidding. It's the tourbillon. The tourbillon is rather cleanly put together, well skeletonized, which is kind of the point of something like this. It's not a completely skeletonized tourbillon. It's semi-skeletonized. Also, as Peacock says so on their website, I don't really know the difference because I can see right through it and I can see most of it. Or all of it. The point to me is to be able to see all these tiny gears, to be able to see the balance wheel swing, and to be able to see the actual mechanism of the tourbillon. I like the sparse use of gold, as in the color gold, not actual gold, but it's well done to highlight the things that are important, so the balance wheel and some of the gears in the background. It gives it a little bit more depth. The whole thing is kind of monochrome otherwise. So it's a nice addition. This skeletonized dial is a bit more three-dimensional than others, which is a good use of its 11mm of thickness. The movement itself has got about almost 6mm of thickness. In terms of finishing, there are multiple finishing techniques on display, almost sort of like a demonstration of skill. It really feels that way. I think they feel the need to prove themselves, and that's why you have so much depth, so many facets to it, and so many different techniques, whether it's guilloche or striping or even these sort of slats, which I can't really describe. If you look very closely at the stripe finish, you can see that there are still minor surface imperfections on the metal. So this is the point where you really see the bridge between $30,000 Swiss watches and $2,000 Chinese watches with the same mechanisms. It really makes sense because it's less than 1/10 of the price and you're 90% there. That last 10% is where you have diminishing returns, and that's the most expensive 10% in which all of us watch enthusiasts sort of tend to live in this hobby. So the part about this watch that's obviously really interesting is the tourbillon, and that's the movement. So the complication is not at all value adding in terms of accuracy, but it's super value adding in terms of being able to look at it, explain it to your friends, and have a chat. That's the whole point of most of these things. That's the whole point of this hobby, really. Peacock is well known for their movements being up to mark, and that's because they develop many movements. They've got patents for their movements, and I'd say it's up to standard for the asking price. At just under $2,000, there's a ton of value to be had in this. Still though, it's not an alternative to a Swiss watch with the same complications. Naturally, that would be 20 times the price, but this is 90% there, and that's the whole point of getting one of these watches. It's because of the price and the level of manufacturing you're able to get for the price. There is some level of handmadeness to this because you can't really finish a watch using an automated machine. It has to be hand polished and checked. It's done to a level which is roughly 90% that of a Swiss watch. And that's that last 10% of diminishing returns in terms of price, which is the entire debate. Do you get a watch that's got more for less but doesn't do it as well? Or do you pay the Swiss to come and sort it out for 20 times more? The movement itself operates at 3 Hertz, and you hear every single one of those hertz. It's loud. At an arm's length in a quiet room, you can just about hear it tick away. And if you've got it on your desk while working, it's going to annoy you. So keep that in mind. Something really cool is that you can find the design blueprint of this movement online. And this, to me, is super intriguing, super interesting. It's really not something you can find for almost any other watch, particularly the complicated watches that you really want to know specifications for, dimensions for, distances, and how the architecture is laid out. And you can see all of that here on this schematic, which is super cool to me. So let's talk about the Peacock brand. Now, the reason I agreed to making a video on one of these watches is because I noticed that they actually have some pedigree to their brand, to their watches, and to what they've been producing over the last almost 70 years. Incepted in 1957, this has been a strong local brand in China. We've not known about it, but they've been producing tons of calibers, tons of watches over the years. They have a service center for their movements, for their watches, which is another key thing when getting a complicated watch. So I wanted to qualify their watches first based on these things. So there are some really sort of interesting choices in terms of what they choose to do on the dial. But it's got an identity and it's got an actual long-term brand backing it. Now, they don't necessarily have the direction of Swiss brands, but I think it's an evolving market and they have the capacity to make so many different things. Perhaps you've seen another watch making the rounds of YouTube. It's called the Black Hole Tourbillon. It's a super interesting central tourbillon concept that other YouTubers have made videos on. I had the option to make a video on that, but I wanted a watch that's more classic, that's wearable, that's 41 millimeters. And this is the best one I could find. So here we are. So for transparency's sake, I get to keep this watch for making this video on it. I also did pick this watch from all their watches to make it because I like this one. No money was involved. I don't get paid. And there is a discount code, but it's not an affiliate link and I get nothing from it if you choose to use it, which if you want this watch, you should use it. So thanks for watching. Check out the link if you want this watch and see you in the next vid. Very nice. This box is better than a Rolex box. So just hang on. Ooh. Ooh. That is nice. It's warranty card.